All right. Hey everyone. My name is Alex Friedman. I'm the acting planning manager for the city of Takoma Park. There's some folks here that I haven't met before, which I'm excited to see. So I figure since maybe we're a small group, do want to go around real quick and just give a quick like who you are and what brought you here tonight. Maybe starting with Joel, since you were first to arrive.
Yes. I'm Joel. I'm a new Takoma Park resident since the summer. I'm a bike commuter. I wouldn't call myself an avid bicyclist, but I like to get around by bike, and just curious what the state of the bike situation is. I mean, and winter biking, I guess. Obviously, I bike less in winter, but I'm more interested in the macro biking plan than in particularly winter, but we'll see. Yeah, so I figured I'd show up.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Dan?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Dan Goodman. I've lived in Takoma Park for about 13 or 14 years at this point. I've got two 13-year-olds and a 10-year-old, and they are both walking and biking around town at this point quite a bit. And it's definitely made me think about that experience a little bit differently. Actually, I also do pedestrian and bicycle planning in my day job, but I'm actually here as a resident. I live on Philadelphia Avenue in Takoma Park. So
one of our less
Yeah.
pedestrian and bike friendly
Yes.
roadways, but
Okay.
you can take that one up with the State Highway
Yeah.
Administration. Thank you, Dan. And Callie.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Appreciate you holding two of these sessions. So glad to be here this evening. My name is Callie. I work at WABA, the Washington Area Bicyclist Association. I focus mostly on shared use paths, our trail system, focusing across the region, so Northern Virginia, DC, and Maryland, but also want to make sure that I am tracking what else is going on. So glad to be here.
Cool, I'm glad to have you. This meeting is now the third iteration of this that I have held. These are a machination of just my own interest in trying to, get a better pulse of what's going on the ground as far as bike issues in Takoma Park. I, work in Takoma Park. I bike around Takoma Park when I go to the office, but I don't live in Takoma Park, so I don't get to see the day-to-day quite as much as residents living on the streets around town. So the way that I sort of planned for this evening, it's going to be a pretty quick little presentation that's a snapshot of kind of all the big bike projects that I'm working on right now with the city. And then I kind of wanted to turn it around to a discussion about where there are opportunities that you all have seen for bike improvements that we can start looking at now or down the road. Where are there places that you think are really great and you're like, do more of that? And also I had a sort of special side curiosity beyond just a general like bring forth your interests and concerns discussion. I'm also really curious to pick your brains, and it's nice to hear that at least one person in the room has kids who bike around Takoma Park, but I'm really interested in trying to figure out ways to bring more youth into the discussions around bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So if we have time at the end of this, I'd love to kind of pick the group's brain and see, other than, begging them and bribing them with pizza, what are some other ways to sort of more wholly engage with a constituency that really relies on bikes and walking around town in a big way. So with that, first of all, hi, Paul, welcome. We just gave like a super quick round of introductions if you're interested in doing so, but also no pressure.
Sure, I can. My name's Paul Mackey. I live on Prince George's Avenue down in the Forest Park area of Takoma Park. It's sort of between East-West Highway and New Hampshire Avenue. And my professional career, I've been sort of in the bike space and transportation space for quite a while. And so I'm just interested to hear what the plan is. And, I think there's probably there's certainly all over DC and Takoma Park, there's certainly lots of room for bike infrastructure improvement. I ride my bike to work down in Chinatown. And I'm probably 80 to 90% on bike lanes, not protected bike lanes really at all, but bike lanes. But I think if I were a less experienced rider, I would be pretty hesitant to ride, even Takoma Park, a place where you'd think there'd be bike infrastructure everywhere.
Thanks for coming, Paul. It's nice to meet you.
You too.
And Jill, you jumped in right as we were sort of wrapping up introductions. I'll give you, if you are interested in giving a quick, who are you and what brought you here tonight? We'd love that. But I think you're on mute still.
Sorry, yes, I'm on mute, and apparently Joel is in the other room. Apparently in the same meeting.
We're roommates.
Yes, we're overrepresented in this meeting, but yes, also new to Takoma Park and avid bikers and bike commuters, and excited to hear about what the plans are.
Awesome.
And
Welcome.
we also have an 8-year-old daughter who also bikes.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you all again for coming. For those who jumped in just a few moments ago, my name's Alex. I'm the acting planning manager for the city. So I made a little presentation. I figured instead of like throwing a million photos at you of projects that don't exist yet, that I'll keep it lean, so we can get through some content and open the floor to like any questions and things you have. I think for the sake of time, maybe I'll kind of like run through the first page. We can stop, ask questions, dance around with that content a little bit, and then we'll move forward to the next one, just so we don't get too far off into the weeds before we kind of get through the meat and potatoes of things. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see this cover slide well enough? Great. So welcome. I clearly didn't update this properly because it is not spring anymore. It is now winter. But thanks for joining us. Just to get started, I'm going to do a quick overview of current initiatives that we're working on right now in Takoma Park. And when I say we, our planning team, I'm the acting planning manager. The planning team in Takoma Park right now is me, our part-time Safe Routes to School coordinator who just started, and our part-time intern. So we are a small but scrappy team. We pull in our colleagues from other divisions. We work very closely with Public Works, all to kind of make bike facilities and infrastructure happen around the city. So probably our biggest project, it has been going on the longest of all of these that we're going to talk about, is the New Avenue Bikeway. The New Avenue Bikeway is designed as a mostly protected, separated, multi-directional or two-way bike path that will go along New Hampshire Avenue from Holton Lane, now excitingly down to the DC border. It's been divided up into sections which accommodated grant funding. It is a fully sort of grant pursued project. So sections A and B go from Holton Lane to Poplar. Ideally, in the once its fullest vision is completed, it will connect the transit center at the Tacoma Langley Crossroads to DC and its bike infrastructure. But sections A and B are in the 100% final design stage. Section A is running a little behind. It was supposed to be done this winter. It's probably going to be done next summer. And section B is actually running ahead. It was supposed to be done next fall, and it's probably going to be done in a couple months. So we're pretty excited about that because once these designs are complete, they're 5 years in the making, I think. They'll be ready for construction pending funding, which will require another grant. Because we're a small city, we can't drop that kind of money on single projects right out of the budget. But then the exciting new development for this, in addition to getting those projects to 100% design, is that this fall we were awarded a technical assistance grant to begin preliminary design work for what we're calling Section D, which is the southernmost section. Also trying to get it known as the district connector, but it hasn't quite caught on yet. And functionally it'll go from Poplar through the neighborhoods of the Pinecrest area to connect with DC's bike infrastructure, located at on Kansas Lane on the Takoma Park side, Kansas Avenue on the DC side where it meets Eastern Avenue. This is an important connection because I think the original plan imagined that the route would go straight down and connect at the very bottom corner of Takoma Park where New Hampshire and Eastern meet. However, the public right-of-way between the roadway and the private properties from basically Poplar Avenue southward are almost non-existent. It is just the tiniest little right-of-way. The sidewalk is barely even ADA compliant in width. And so to add bike lane width to the existing sidewalk would have either required buying private property up, which is sort of out of the scope of possibility for us, or getting SHA to give up some substantial roadway, which also is the State Highway Administration has not indicated that that is anything that they're willing to consider anytime soon. Additionally, once you hit DC at New Hampshire Avenue, there's no real bike infrastructure there. So when we rethinking where this makes the most sense for the most users, we looked north a little bit to Kansas, where there are existing bike lanes on the DC side. And as chance would have it, the times I've been out to go take pictures and walk around the route, proposed routes, which are being decided upon, I've seen a number of neighborhood bike riders biking the path that I imagined would make the most sense. So that felt kind of nice. But for Section D, as well as, for Section D, this coming Saturday, we're actually doing a site walk and ride that'll be at 1:00 p.m. on Saturday. At this point, the weather looks good enough that we're going to do it, even if it's a little misty out. But that's going to be an opportunity for communities to come out and talk and share ideas and concerns. It's this project, the Section D, is just getting started. We have a contractor on board and they've started doing surveying, but that's it. So we're excited to be getting that part of this project moving. Then a project that has been longer in the making than I wish it was, but I've been calling the Great Bike Rack Install of 2022. We purchased this past summer, 54 new hoop style bike racks and one new Fix-It community bike repair station. Those we had hoped were going to get installed in locations that would cover almost every city park and new secure parking at almost every business district in the city. It's in some degree. That includes in the crossroads where there's also notoriously little public right of way for us to just do things as we please in. So I've been negotiating with private properties there, and we have 2 on board already who have agreed to let us install at no cost to them some bike racks near their entrances so that people can park their bikes. This is something that while we have all the racks waiting to be installed, none have yet been installed for a variety of logistical reasons, mostly relating to capacity issues with our public works team, who is working their buns off right now. And this plus some contract negotiation issues related to concrete have made getting a lot of these installed a little bit delayed. So we're working on this one. They're ready, they're there. Keep an eye out. Any questions on these 2 projects before we kind of move on to the next tranche? All right. You can always
I
come
guess
back.
I would, well,
yeah.
I would ask, I think that's probably, that sounds like a really good idea to have that New Hampshire bikeway cut off at Poplar and go up to Kansas. I think you're probably on the right path there, because I just imagine, already on that stretch, it seems potentially a little terrifying to bike on New Hampshire with such high speeds of vehicles. And then especially that stretch in front of the gas stations and all that, from Poplar to Eastern, seems kind of unlikely that it would ever be super busy. So I think, that's just kind of the same way I go into work, or when I go into DC, is I cut over down past the VFW and up Kansas the whole way. So are you saying that, well, I guess that wouldn't be Takoma Park at that point. Once you get to Kansas, there won't be protected bike lane installation there?
Correct. And through that route, we haven't quite yet gotten far enough along to know exactly what kind of infrastructure could even fit. Well, they're pretty quiet residential streets, so it seems that at least for portions of it, it's probably unlikely that there will be like full-on protected, bollarded, curbed path the whole way through the neighborhood, but that's still kind of like further down the road for knowing exactly what that means. And then it's not our project because Eastern Avenue is not under the jurisdiction of Takoma Park, but the district's Department of Transportation also has in their capital budget and a fully created design, a total overhaul of Eastern Avenue, basically from the bottom of Takoma Park up to the top of Takoma Park, that will include its own bike infrastructure, new sidewalks, lane narrowing, I think, to 3 lanes instead of 4. So it will look very different in, I think it's in their 2026 capital budget for DDOT to install that infrastructure. And so if we can link into all of this, I think that would be a really impactful network connector.
Yeah, it seems like the lane on New Hampshire, then people would be able to connect eventually then over on the Eastern ride up into downtown Takoma Park. Do you anticipate any pushback or anything like that from that neighborhood down around the VFW? Because there probably a lot of cut through there, I would think.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think that there are a lot of folks in that neighborhood who are bike riders. There's also, generally speaking, anytime we're looking at new infrastructure through a neighborhood, I'm always, expecting that there are people who just don't like change. And, it's an area that has had not a lot of this kind of investment. So I'm hoping that at our community walkthrough this Saturday, that it'll be a chance to sort of like air some of the concerns, because I don't fully know yet what those are to even start addressing them. I know from my visit, and it sounds like from your writing, that people are already using that area as a place to bike. So if we can formalize it a little, make it a little safer, it's already an area that also has a lot of traffic calming. There's a lot of speed bumps through there. So it's a neighborhood that seems invested in traffic safety. And I'm hopeful that will match up nicely with some of the ideas that come out of this.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't heard anything about, anti-bicycle infrastructure or anything there. So I think hopefully it'll be fairly fluid.
Great. Cool. Thanks, Paul. Let's jump on to the next set. So one thing that is, it's not a Takoma Park project, but Takoma Park is playing a major role as a technical advisory committee member, is on this Montgomery County bikeway branding plan. Montgomery County's Department of Transportation is working on this. I mean, what is a branding plan? Trying to create a cohesive look and feel and standardized set of like signage and markings to mark their bikeways across the county. And they invited Takoma Park as well as Rockville and Gaithersburg, the other 2 sort of independent jurisdictions, join in this conversation so that we don't, get anything thrust upon us that we're not interested in or not ready for. And it's been an interesting conversation looking at the kinds of bike infrastructure that they're planning for across the county. So we're expecting to see that sort of plan come to fruition this coming spring. How it will look in Takoma Park right now, I mean, in full honesty, like we don't have a ton of on the road bikeways at the moment. So I don't think we would see like a dramatic change in signage very soon, but as we implement new things, it's an opportunity to create a sense of wayfinding that would hopefully allow for people to feel like they are part of a network that would take them beyond just Takoma Park if they so wanted to, or if they're outside of Takoma Park and end up in Takoma Park, are not suddenly disoriented by a change in signage or a change in the way directions are given for people riding bicycles. So it's an interesting project that I've been intrigued to hang along with. Then on the same grant that we got funding to do the preliminary design work for section D of the New Ave Bikeway, we also got funding to give the Metropolitan Branch Trail an upgrade. The Met Branch Trail is a dedicated recreational path that once it's eventually finished, will go from like Union Station in DC all the way up to the Silver Spring Transit Center. Mostly following the Red Line's metro right-of-way, more or less. The city of Takoma Park has one of the first segments of that trail that was created, I want to say like 20 years ago, maybe. It was quite a while ago. Unfortunately, it has not been really upgraded since then. So now the path is not in great condition. The pavement's pretty cracked. It is narrower than the suggested sort of best practices in bikeways. And DC just finished their section to the south of us. Silver Spring, Montgomery County are working on designing the section to the north of us. And I didn't want us to get left behind with the sad broken piece of the trail. So we're starting this process now. This will be another one that kind of goes through rounds of grant funding. So it'll be some years before we get to any sort of shovels in the ground, but we are doing the preliminary design work for this. So the concept design, which is really just the initial sketch out of like what could be, will hopefully be completed by this summer. And the process we're doing on Saturday, another walk and ride through that. That'll be from 11 to 12 is the Met Branch Trail. 1 to 2 will be section D of the New Ave Bikeway. Anyone who is interested in taking their bike on either of these journeys, I'm going to have my bike and I'm going to lead a ride from one site to the other, so that people can kind of feel the route, feel the possibility. Also for this and the section D project, these walkthroughs are an add-on beyond the grant scope, but I felt like it was really important to try and bring community conversation into this process early, so that no one gets caught unawares later on feeling like they didn't know what was happening, didn't get a chance to share concerns early on, because I want the contractors working on this to also be able to build that into their planning process. And the firm doing both the Met Branch Trail and New Ave Bikeway is RK&K, if that means anything to you out there. And then the final big project that we're working on is a revival of what was previously known as the Maple Avenue Complete Street. We have rebranded. It is now the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project. The rebrand was a little bit for making it available for larger pools of grant funding. Its core is still very much the same, which is looking at Maple Avenue from the DC border to Sligo Creek and trying to reimagine all the different sections of it as a space that is more comfortable, and more inviting and more safe for all users of the road, but in particular, people who are on foot or on bike. The extent of Maple Avenue is really challenging because the uphill section on the south of Maple Avenue is quite narrow and it's very historic and it's very steep in parts. The flat part to the north gets really wide, but also is a major thoroughfare for students getting to and from school. It has a pocket of retail that gets really busy during lunchtime. And it is a major connector to Sligo Creek, while also being a place where some of the densest housing in Takoma Park is, with these large multifamily buildings. So there's a lot of complexity at play, and we're picking up the project where it left off, which was at the 30% concept design. We're actually going to backtrack a little bit, reassess some of the understandings from 30% design, because the that process, I have, in my opinion, as a staff person, and I've heard ongoing from community members of a wide swath of Takoma Park, the sort of final product was something that was a bit of a compromise, and I think we could firm it up a little bit better to be something that meets more people's needs. So we're taking half a step back, and then we're really fortunate that the funding that we were awarded can take us all the way through to final designs, instead of doing what we've done with the new Ave Bikeway, which is these like pieces along the way. This grant also includes a feasibility study for looking at improved bike and pedestrian crossings at the bridge over Maple Avenue, and seeing kind of what our options are there, considering that it's kind of an old bridge, but it's not so old that it's falling apart, and it's crossing an environmentally sensitive habitat, and it's heavily used, and right now it is not ADA accessible. So that is, we just got the grant agreement signed, like the executed grant agreement back today. So that project, we still need to go through an RFP to bring on a contractor. It's a 2-year grant, so we probably won't have any kind of major community outreach for a little bit while we kind of get our feet under us with it, but expect lots of community engagement on this one. That is all I've got for a review of these projects. Any thoughts, questions, concerns, wishes, or dreams? All right.
Can you say anything more about what you think might change about that,
About the design.
about the Maple Ave one?
You know, I don't know fully yet. I think the 30% design as it was crafted was a lot of shared use, like sharrow markings on the roadway, especially on the wider, flatter part. I think some of the inhibition and to be brash, like sort of lack of boldness of the design, I think also came from the setting the parameter of trying to keep the curb line exactly where it is. And I would like to open the scope of that to kind of include the potential to maybe move curb lines, so that it gives us a little more wiggle room for how we can reconfigure the roadway. But other than that, I don't have any hard and fast changes yet to reveal, mostly because, you know, in some ways, I think there's an element of going back to the drawing board. I've heard raised before sort of concerns about, you know, in the areas where there are these large multifamily buildings, there's some concern about losing parking on the street, which may for some buildings be the only places where guests can park. At the same time, there's concerns about losing parking on the uphill southern part of Maple, because it is narrow, and nobody likes giving up parking ever. But also, I've heard really strong pleas from the elementary school there, Piney Branch Elementary School, that the crossings for students are not safe, and there are very nearly avoided crashes on a regular basis, to the point where the principal goes out and does traffic control in addition to 3 Montgomery County provided traffic guards who are on Maple Avenue. There was just a pretty significant bike crash at the corner of Philadelphia and Maple a couple weeks ago. So we know that there's an issue here, and I think the status quo is unacceptable. So we're kind of moving from that place.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
That is a dangerous intersection, and mostly, as far as I can tell, we live on that southern side of Maple on the hill. And coming down toward, and the kid goes to elementary, to Piney Branch. The drivers there always they do not care about the cross signal. They do not have a pedestrian signal. They are always looking to jump that signal, even if there's like kids waiting on both sides. So
yeah,
I'll just, you probably know this already, but
that's good. I mean, every anecdote is a notch in support of doing something. And that particular intersection is extra complicated because Philadelphia Avenue is a state highway administration managed roadway. So we don't have as much ability to do full wholesale change at that particular intersection without their approval, which can sometimes be difficult to attain.
well,
We're not going to try.
I'll just add that the most dangerous part we happen to live on the west side of the street. So it's coming south from Maple onto Philadelphia, that like really wide turn in front of the community center.
Yeah.
That's where people are like, who cares about pedestrians? We're cars.
Yeah.
And, I imagine it's
such
probably
a wide
even worse
radius.
with bikes. So you have a little more control in as much as it's the southbound Maple part that's the problem.
Yeah, you can
The
count on
problem
the
is
fact
the
that we're not
drivers have a green light. They can turn right on green while the walkers have a walk signal, and that's really dangerous.
Yeah,
So that's a
maybe where the bug
signalization
is.
problem.
Maybe it's in the
Yeah.
light itself. Yeah, I agree with that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm excited to pick this project up again. I think so many of the projects we work on that are infrastructure based are so tied to grant cycles, and I'm glad we were able to get a bigger chunk this go around.
Hey,
Oh, hey there.
hi, Jaira. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi.
This is Jaira. So I'm on here because I bike with my kids on Maple Avenue,
Okay.
and we live on Grant. So we
Okay.
are usually coming down Grant Avenue, which is again a hill, turning some direction on Maple Avenue, but usually right and heading towards Sligo Creek. And Grant is one of the few streets that doesn't have a stop sign on Maple Avenue. And I've often thought, if we just keep stopping the cars more, they have to slow down for a stop sign, whereas they don't necessarily slow down and stop for a pedestrian waiting at the crosswalk or a bike waiting at the crosswalk. And we've often thought, just put a stop sign in, then they have to stop. It's an easy change. So I don't know if that could ever get into a plan, but
Yeah, that's
we'd be game.
definitely within the scope of this project to look at.
Yep,
Thank you for sharing that.
no problem.
I'm going to jump into, just for the sake of time, sort of the final section of this conversation. It's going to open up into broader things. So if there are any things you want to kind of circle back on, definitely want to do so. But before kind of opening the full stage open, I wanted to just point to a couple things that are kind of in the pipeline. They don't have any kind of official funding yet or particular mandate, but they're things that I'm working on in the back of my head and keeping eyes open for opportunities. Multiple times I've heard from bike bike folks in the community that the intersection at Flower and Garland can feel a little hairy. It's where the Sligo Creek Trail crosses Flower Avenue. And at the moment, this satellite picture actually has more sidewalks present than there are in reality at the moment. That north leg currently doesn't exist because there was some road work done and it never got repainted. The striped section is even more faded out than that now than it was before. And the west leg is also not super evident. So I've got some ideas percolating to try and beef up the visibility for bikers and sense of safety at this intersection. And also looking at Grant Avenue from the middle school down to the community center. There was a student who was run into by another student on an electric scooter. And it sort of brought to light that you can catch a lot of speed, especially when you get to the bottom of that hill where there's the sort of narrow straightaway connecting the dead end street to the community center. So we're looking at some, at the very minimum, some sort of visual signage and pavement markings to try and break up the need for speed a little bit. But we're also kind of in conversation with the principal, Principal Martin at the middle school, trying to make sure that there are opportunities for building in her and her staff's perspectives on safety on that area too. So I know that those are sitting in the back of my head, but are not sort of official, projects yet. But in our last sort of 15 minutes together, I'd really love to hear from folks. I know a bunch of folks have joined since we started the presentation. I would love to hear about any other opportunities you see around town for improvements. And also, I'm going to combine everything into one big chunk. I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation that I'm really interested in finding ways to build youth into our conversations around bike and pedestrian infrastructure more. And I know that we have a number of parents in the room, so I'm curious to pick your brains about what are the things that would excite your kids to participate in conversation. What are the formats that you think would be effective? What are the pathways for sharing information at a age appropriate level that you think would be engaging? So with all of those invitations, I open the floor to anyone who has thoughts.
Well, I'm not sure, if this is feasible or not, but I'll share an idea that I've certainly seen and probably other folks have seen. But it'd be very cool if I know there's like a bike to school day and some of the things that happen with that. But if increasing the frequency from where it's at now, if it was possible to do more than once, season or school year. And also I've seen some other cities, kind of also even have the support to like kind of having a rolling ride down, maybe not completely closing streets or anything like that, but just, ways to support that being a really comfortable experience and increasing the frequency of those types of things. I know that gets my kids excited to participate in traveling somewhere, on their bike, and raises awareness and visibility to it and things like that. But just one little thing.
Cool, thank you. And I think that's a great idea. I'm really excited. We just brought on a new Safe Routes to School coordinator. Actually, Lucy, who's pictured here in this photo, was with us for over 10 years, and she retired now last fall. So we've been kind of short on capacity with our Safe Routes program, but just 3 weeks ago we brought on a new person, and we're excited for her to ramp things back up again. So I'll definitely share that thought with her.
All right, Jared has an idea.
Yes, please.
Like some some kind of maze or something.
Like a scavenger hunt.
Ooh, have you done one of those before?
Not exactly.
Not exactly, but you think it would be a cool
Right.
idea to explore?
Yeah.
Very good. Can I, if we start moving forward with something like that, can I reach out to you for some more ideas about it?
Okay.
Cool. I'll make sure to take down your contact information from the Zoom registration.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
I feel like there's something about bike buses or some sort of like bike to school groups. That's one thing. I've done like bike trains, but they haven't been super formal. They're like monthly in previous school districts. And another thing, like the maze idea, is I've seen at like events where like you could imagine the I don't know, any kind of large Tacoma Park city event, you know, whether it's the fair or the folk festival or whatever, like setting up bike areas for kids to like go around cones and stuff like that. So having like a bike centric thing at a public thing or in the parking lot of the middle school during whatever, those are ways that I've seen other places get kids on bikes doing stuff.
Yes, it's great you brought that up, Joel, because that reminded me of something I probably should have mentioned, which is that we through our Safe Routes to School funding have received funding to work with each of the elementary and middle, I think it's actually just the elementary schools in Takoma Park, to provide training bike fleets to them for them to use with their students for bike education. And we're looking into a feasibility study through our Safe Routes to School grant for a bike, what do they call it? Oh, a traffic garden, which is kind of dedicated. It's almost like one of those like rugs that you see in a kindergarten room with like a town mapped out on it with all like the roads and the stop signs and the crosswalks painted out on the pavement for students or residents or whomever in whatever context it is to be able to kind of bike around and have fun, but also imagine the real conditions of a roadway and sort of practice stopping at crossings and using bike signals and using arm signals to turn and building confidence and different maneuvers. So that is a thing that is also in the works. The tough part now is finding a flat open space that is not actively used as a parking lot. But we'll work on it.
I had a couple ideas for kid related things, and I think my internet's going out a little bit. So you tell me if there's a problem. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you seem fine.
Okay. One thing I'll point out is that my middle schoolers can get community service hours. They have to get a certain amount of community service hours before they graduate from high school. But I've been really surprised how focused they are.
Ooh, it was going so well.
Yeah, I might need to call in on my cell phone. Can you hear me?
You just got back. Yeah, you're saying you were so surprised at how well, and then you cut out.
I'll try calling back on my cell phone.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, sorry about that.
While we're waiting for him, I'll just say, I think, one of the interesting things about Takoma Park and one of the challenges that we've had with our kids over the years is that we live at the bottom of a bunch of hills. And, I think a lot of people can relate to, there's a lot of really hilly, somewhat challenging, maybe less challenging for little kids because they don't really care so much about having to climb hills, but it can be a challenge to just get out of the house on a bike in Takoma Park because there are so many hills. So, instead of focusing, if you have limited funding, hopefully there'll be more funding from the infrastructure funding that comes through for this kind of stuff from Biden's bill. But if you have limited funding, it seems to, and I'm sure you're doing this, but really focus on building protected bikeways on the streets where people are trying to get out from the hills out to the main roadway. So you think of something like East West and Carroll and all those connecting streets right near the downtown. Like instead of like Elm is a street that goes sort of bypasses East West and Carroll in a way that it goes through all the neighborhoods, but it's really up and down hills. So it's not really as good of a place to build protected infrastructure as a main road. But if you could focus on those main roads around Takoma Park and put in protected bike infrastructure, I think there's enough of them that you would have a really nice protected network that could get you just about anywhere. When I go out and visit my family in the Midwest, it's so easy there to have great trails because everything is so flat and you can literally get from one end of town to the other any which way you look at it. It's much more difficult in a place like Takoma Park. So you have to look for those roads, I think, that are less hilly is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because people will try to get as quickly as they can to those roads. And then if you could protect those, then more people would feel safe, including kids on the roadways.
That's a great point. And you bump up against one of our biggest headaches as a city, which is that with the exception of Maple Avenue, every single large road, except also for Flower now, is managed by the State Highway Administration, which is, I don't use as an excuse not to try to do anything, but it means our journey to change is much longer and rockier. Now that said, as evidenced by the four-way stop that went in at Lincoln and Carroll, and the four-way stop that's going in at Ethan Allen and Elm, in spite of SHA's best efforts to not get things to happen, advocacy and pressure from the city did bring about change. So it's not impossible, but it is challenging. And I think you're right that the hills really pose a kind of unique challenge in Takoma Park, even compared to like regionally other neighboring communities. We're just like especially full of our stream valley characteristics. I also want to note that I've been totally avoiding the chat, so I wanted to address a couple of the things that came up there. Katrina asked an important question, and thank you for doing so, which is, what is 30% design? It's total planning and engineering jargon, but projects are sort of measured in these percentage complete milestones. So it's sort of traditionally, it's like 30%, 60 or 65%, 90%, 100%. 30% is like the concept design. It's like the rough sketch of what could be there, but it's not had a lot of technical analysis to like make sure that the slopes are right, or the widths are accurate, or the boundary lines are exact. That then advances to 60%, or like semi-final designs. That process is where all of the details kind of get banged out for like what you see looks like. And then 60 to 90 or 100 is usually most of like the technical work. So there's not actually a lot of change to design usually at that point. But even though it seems like sort of in a math sense that like going from 60 to 100 means there's like a lot of leeway still for like getting to 100, really after 60%, plans are generally pretty set in stone, because there's a lot of technical analysis that's needed to make sure the subsurface of the roadway is right and the angles of the materials are correct and that sort of stuff. And I am no engineer, so let me preface that at the get-go too, that I'm always the one chafing up against the engineers who are like, that's not how this works. I'm like, okay. Randy Gibson joined us, our new council member. Welcome, Randy. so I should say Councilmember Gibson now. He suggested an idea of doing bike and hike tours to the parks to engage kids with the natural environment, which I think sounds like a super idea. We're so blessed with natural resources in the city and Sligo Creek Park and our neighborhood parks that I think those kind of activities would be really cool. And then Brian just giving a thumbs up to the fact that Philadelphia is a real pain. I want to honor people's time tonight. That it's a Thursday night. We're coming up on 8:30. We have about 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to see if there were any final thoughts, questions, places to offer ideas or concerns or suggestions.
I think this is piggybacking off of something I think maybe Paul said earlier, that people go to the flat roads like Carroll Avenue. And when we do bike with kids on Carroll Avenue, we usually have the kids biking on the sidewalk and the adults biking in the road. It would be really nice. I know it's a narrow road, but it would be really wonderful to have a protected bike lane for them, because that's a route we're going to continue to take as they get older, and we'll hope that they someday can do themselves. And yeah, that would make it a lot safer, but I know it's a narrow road. So
yeah, no, I hear you. We're keeping our eyes on opportunities. I appreciate that.
Do you think there is much opportunity to work with the state highway, with Maryland DOT to get more bike infrastructure with the new money that will be coming in for transportation?
So there's definitely pathways for new funds coming in, and actually Callie maybe would know more about some of these opportunities than I would. I know that, but from a couple different directions. Most recently, bipartisan Infrastructure Act funds are starting to trickle down, but there's like a variety of like state and county and metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, which is our sort of regional planning body. They do a lot of, they have new funds coming down the pipeline. So I think we're gonna have a lot of money coming on the table soon, and I'm trying to queue up when all the timetables match so we can pair them with projects. But I'm also curious to know, with a changing state administration, if that will change how the priorities for the state DOT get reconfigured, and if that will have changes and what we are able to do. That I can't say at all yet, but we'll be keeping a close eye on. Callie, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think your summary is great. I think we are optimistic that there should be more opportunities kind of at all levels of government. I think as we have administrations that are supportive of finding alternative transportation options and healthy recreation. I can say that we are hopeful that we may be able to support some changes at the state level to use some of the federal funds that are often designated just for highways. There is new flexibility to use half of those funds towards bike, transit, and alternative transportation. So we're hoping that that could open up a whole new pot of money for some of the great projects you're hearing Alex talk about. So I think, continue to keep our eyes to the ground, are really excited for WABA to work with folks like Alex and try to jump on those opportunities as they come up.
Thank you, Callie. Any final thoughts? Because I have a final closing thought if not.
Just a thank you again for continuing these sessions. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. I started these sessions when I was new to the city last year, knowing that I can't get better wisdom than talking with people who are living in all corners of the city and experiencing it every day of their lives. So this is so valuable to me, and I really appreciate that you have all taken the time to come out and share thoughts and feedback. I'm happy to have given some updates on things. If you ever have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me. I'm located at the city building, the community center on Maple Avenue. I'm regularly taking Capital Bike Share to work, although because of construction, unfortunately, the Capital Bike Share stand at the community center is temporarily in storage. I care deeply about these issues, and I'm really working my hardest to try and stretch our dollars and stretch our relationships with different agencies to make as much of this happen as we can. So as far as kind of next steps and final wrap up here, I'm going to consolidate the notes from tonight's meeting, and also tomorrow we have another identical meeting at noon, or I guess 12:30, for folks who couldn't make it tonight or have schedules that don't allow for evening participation. And I'm going to consolidate all of those notes. I'm going to put them on the city's Bikeways website, and also share out the recordings of these two meetings as well. So we can make sure all these thoughts are captured for posterity. But with that, I thank you all for your time. I'll stick around for a minute or two for anyone who has lingering last minute questions, but I'm going to stop the recording and wish you all a restful evening.